Take it away.
Hello, peeps. So this is where our district grant money went to this year. We are doing a project for Comfort Cases. Rob Scheer is actually the founder and CEO of Comfort Cases. I'm really excited to welcome him here today. It's an organization that gives children being taken out of any crisis situation and placed into foster care, a backpack full of comfort items to help them ease that transition. It's a very undignified process when children are told, take a plastic garbage bag, fill it with your things and take it with you, and that's all you've got. So Rob set out to kind of change that 8 years ago, 11 years ago, 10 years ago. And so each child that he can get a backpack to through a social service agency will get a new backpack with comfort care items, which is a blanket, new pajamas, a stuffed animal, a book, a journal, and some toiletry items. I don't really want to say a whole lot about Rob because he's got a great story and he's going to tell you a lot about himself. I'm just going to bring it down closer to home for us. There's a severity right now of kids going into foster care. During COVID, a lot of things kind of got swept under the carpet. A lot of situations weren't addressed. Kids were left in bad situations. And now we're seeing an influx of kids going into foster care, even right here in Fairfax County. So on any given day, 437,000 youth are in foster care throughout the US. 700 kids enter the foster care system every single day in this country. And Fairfax, abuse and neglect cases have surged during the last year. As of May 2023, more than 188 new kids have been placed in foster care or under protective court order. That's nearly double the 98 cases there were last year. So 60% of these cases involve domestic violence compared to the typical that's 30% in the past. Kids are also being born with drugs in their system. We had 5 kids last year in Fairfax County. We have 32 this year that were born with addictions. And it's just a growing crisis. So Rob brings a little bit of hope to these kids and a little bit of dignity and a little bit of comfort. And that's what he's all about. And we're going to play a small part in that because Rob's going to speak. Then he's got to fly off somewhere to speak again. And then he's got to fly off from there and speak again. But after he's done, we are going to pack Comfort Cases as a group, and the Comfort Cases volunteers will come and pick them up today. And my gut instinct is they won't be in your warehouse for very long. So please welcome Rob Scheer.
Wow. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? You know, this is actually full circle for me. Full circle. See, I started my journey 30 minutes down the road. 30 minutes down the road. You know, the very first check that Comfort Case received 10 years ago was from the Rotary Club. From the Rotary Club. Last year, when I had the honor to receive the Paul Harris Award, I knew for a fact the reason that why my bond was so close to the Rotary Club. I have spoken to Rotary Clubs, not all over the United States, but actually all over the world. Because I'm here to tell you that, as Nelson Mandela said, you judge your society by the way you treat your children. Truly, we are all judged by our society by the way we treat our children. And the way that we as a country have treated over 438,000 children, we would actually get an F. We would fail. See, I know that very firsthand because in 1979, I actually walked into foster care right here in Northern Virginia. I'll never forget that day. See, the fact is I was the youngest of 10 kids. My mother had been married 6 times and we lived in and out of every shelter in Maryland, Virginia, and DC. I had already known about that F word, that foster care that you all call it, because my brothers and sisters had already started falling to the wayside. Teenage pregnancy, incarceration, drug addiction. As you sit here today and enjoy your lunch and talk with each other, right now, I will tell you that 80% of our death row inmates were either in foster care or they were touched by foster care. Right there, if that does not tell you as a society, we have failed a group of children, I don't think nothing will. See, you all must understand something, that every single child that enters our system enters the system because of a choice that someone else made, just like the choice that my parents had made, the abuse, the neglect. I remember as a young boy, as I would sit in a bedroom with my brothers and sisters and would pray that today would not be the day he would call my name. And sure enough, he would. Robert. And I would hear that billowing voice, and I would run as fast as I could to the refrigerator. And I would grab that Pabst Blue ribbon and I would run back to his chair. And I knew no matter how fast I ran, whether I was 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, the same thing would happen. He would put the cherry of his cigarette out on my leg. That was my family. That was my home. Until the day finally they came to rescue me, to take me to a foster family, a family that I really truly thought was going to love me. I remember as I walked up that driveway carrying a trash bag. I remember when I walked into the front door, I thought to myself, I wonder if they have a dog. I wonder if they have any kids. And I wonder if they're going to love me. And instead, they didn't even look at me. They didn't even acknowledge that I was standing there. The only thing they were concerned about is the fact that I had torn and tattered clothes in a trash bag, and I didn't have decent clothes to wear to church for the next day. You know, I remember her walking me down the hallway. I remember as a 12-year-old boy, the brown bathroom door, she opened it up, and she looked at me for the first time and said, "You need to take a shower and clean yourself now." And she shut the door behind me. You know, at that very moment of my life, I knew that my life had changed. I knew that I was probably never going to see my brothers and sisters again. I knew that my parents would never be in my life again. But then I looked at it. The one thing that made me really realize how different I was, and it was a bar of soap that was lying in the bathtub. See, the fact is that they expected me to get in that tub, to pick up that bar of soap, and to lather my body with it. And by the way, what were their middle names? What were their favorite colors? I guarantee you that each and every one of you will travel this year. And I guarantee you, as you stay in your hotels, if you walked into your hotel bathroom and there was a used bar of soap in the shower, you'd call management. You'd ask to be removed out of that room. And why? Because it's called dignity. But for me, I just wanted to be loved. And I thought to myself at that moment, I was going to make sure you loved me. I would wake up in the morning and I'd clean your kitchen before you ever asked. And by the way, you didn't have to ask me to watch your biological children, because I watched them all the time. And yes, you reminded me every single day, these are my biological kids and this is our foster child. And yes, remember the time when you took the kids to Disney World and you dropped me off at a stranger's house? Called respite. I remember on that Sunday when you picked me up, I remember hearing the kids in the back seat talk about how great it was to see Mickey Mouse. You didn't once think about how I felt, because I was the foster child, but I just wanted to be loved. And maybe you didn't put my picture on the mantle like you put your other 3 kids, but I felt somewhere in your heart that you did love me. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Oh my God, I was making it. Can you believe the fact that I was getting ready to be the very first person in my family that was actually going to graduate from high school? Do you understand that as you sit here today, that only 54% of kids actually graduate from high school in foster care? That only 11% will fill out a college application, and that only 3% get a college degree. And I was going to graduate. The fall of 1984. I remember walking home from school that day. I had a little bit of kick in my step because I had just turned 18. I was so close to graduation. You know, I was that kid that you actually loved. I was the kid who got the good grades. I went to church every Sunday. And by the way, I called you Mom because I thought you loved me. And I called you Dad because I thought you truly thought I was your son. Until I walked into that house that fall day, and there it sat in the living room, my trash bag filled with my clothes. Wow, I hadn't even thought about it for years. I remember looking at my dad and him saying, "You got to leave, and you have to leave now." I looked at my mom and I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "You can't live in this house any longer. You're 18 years old and we're not getting a check. So if we're not getting a check, you cannot live here. This house, I thought this was my home. Where do I go? Really doesn't matter to us. You need to leave now. And I literally gathered my trash bag and I walked out the front door. I remember that night, just as if it was yesterday, the scariest night of my life. What was I going to do? Who was I going to tell? See, the fact is that if I told you, what were you going to do with me? You're going to put me in one of those juvenile detention centers that you put all those bad kids that you think are from foster care. Where was I going to go? That night, I actually slept under the bridge. I went into school the very next day after I hid my trash bag. And I had decided at that moment, you as a community was not going to stop me from receiving an education. And every day I walked into school. Every day I allowed the kids to push me in the lockers. And by the way, you did not have to remind me how I smelled. I smelled myself. And to remind me that I had holes in my shoes, don't you think I felt the water every time it rained? But I knew that I deserved to have the same thing you got, which was an education. And by the way, yeah, you did catch me in the lunchroom stealing food out of the trash can because I didn't know if I would eat that night. And when I wasn't in school, I was sitting in the public library reading every book I got my hands on because I knew if I would just educate my mind, just maybe I could educate my future. See, the fact is I didn't want to be a statistic. I just wanted to be a kid and I wanted to be loved. And by the way, that guidance counselor who came into Mrs. Brown's English class every single day and pulled the seniors out to ask them what you were going to do with your future, you never asked me. And the reason why, if you looked at me, you have to acknowledge you failed me. June 1985. Gosh, I made it. Graduation day was here. I had actually made it. This scrawny, dirty kid barely had any ability to brush his teeth. I made it. I remember I had to borrow a cap and gown. It was so big, it barely fit me. And I remember the kid in front of me who constantly kept making comments about how I smelled. And by the way, the kid behind me kept laughing at me. But I stood there in that line because I deserved to be there. I remember them calling names, name after name. I remember hearing the parents clapping and screaming as they called the names. And then all of a sudden you called my name. Exactly. No one clapped. No one cheered. No one cared. See, the fact is this bag that was handed to me, it did its job. It made me feel disposable, invisible, as if I didn't matter. You know, I left that auditorium and I never went back to my seat. I went outside to the parking lot. I wanted that teacher to come and find me, the one who used to always have extra food, but she didn't. I sat down on the curb and I truly cried. I cried for my mom and dad. I wanted to feel that cigarette on my leg so bad, because if at least I felt the cigarette out on my leg, at least he was there. I cried for my foster parents. How could you give up on me just because of a check? And then I cried for all of you, my community who did not even feel that I deserved one clap because I graduated. You know, I walked the streets for 2 weeks after that. I'd realized that children in foster care, we only have 3 choices. Choice number 1, we give up. We give up. Suicide rate in foster care is higher than we have ever seen. Number 2, we give in. We do exactly what you think we should do. Incarceration, drug addiction, teenage pregnancy. As we stand here today, 30,000 children this year will age out of foster care. 70% of them, they'll be homeless just like me. Just like me. Or I can do the third thing, and that is give it all I got. I joined the United States Navy. And by the way, I did not join the Navy to protect any of you. I joined the Navy because I was hungry. I was scared, and I wanted a roof over my head. And I became a very successful businessman. And the only thing I cared about was that big house I lived in DC that you walked by and you stopped and said, damn, whoever owns that house, they're successful. I then made sure I bought a really fancy car. I actually bought 2 of them because when I pulled up at the stoplight, you looked at me and you said, wow, that man is successful. And then I filled my bank account so fat I could take you all to Disney World. And then 14 years, my whole life changed. See, the fact is I only had one dream, and that was to be a dad, And so my husband and I decided that we were going to adopt through foster care. I remember saying to him at first, are you sure we want to adopt one of those kids? I know what those kids are about. He said, you were one of those kids. He was right. How dare I think about what you all think? And I didn't think about the children that were in a system that was shattered. And so we filled out the application, and lo and behold, 4 of the most amazing children arrived at our doorstep. My daughter was 4, her little brother was 2. And then literally 3 months later, my 2-year-old and my 6-month-old arrived. Ladies, you had 9 months. I did it in 3. 4 babies. But the thing that broke my heart the most is all 4 of them carried this, a trash bag. God, how dare we? How could we be a community to say that we care so much and we're still getting trash bags out? But for me, the only thing I worried about is the fact that I'm a banker. I own banks all over the country. I worried about the fact that my kids' passports were up to date, the private schools were paid for, they had the designer clothes, and that's the way my life was. Until 10 years ago, as I was sitting in my office right outside of Bethesda, and Reese walked in and said, it's time to do the toy drive. You know, the one that you all to participate in. We do it every year. We gather those toys, for those needy kids. Most of us pat ourselves on the back and say, oh, look at all the toys I bought for those kids. But then on the 26th of December, you wake up and most of you don't even think about those kids. And I'm going to tell you, as a father, half of the toys are broken. And I said, Reese, I don't want to do it. He said, what do you want to do? And I opened up my desk drawer and I pulled out this very trash bag, this one 10 years ago. And I laid it on my desk and I said, I want to eliminate trash bags in the DMV. He said, you batshit crazy. I said, I know, that's why you married me. I said, we're going to do this. And so we gathered members of our church. We gathered some local politicians. We gathered my senior staff. And I shared them with the story that I just shared with you. People were shocked. I had not told my story to many people, but they were absolutely surprised. And I told them about the fact of my daughter arriving the first night and how she did not smile until we handed her a brand new pair of pajamas and she tore the tag off. I said, Amaya, why are you smiling? She said, Mr. Rob, I've never owned a new pair of pajamas before. See, that's not acceptable. And by the way, my beautiful teeth, and I know every one of you know my teeth are beautiful. They cost me an arm and a leg because nobody bothered to give me a toothbrush when I was a little boy. See, the fact is you sit back and you think your government is taking care of these children, but you are wrong. These children do not belong to you. They do not belong to me. They belong to us. And the old saying is when you invest in a child, you invest in their future. That is BS. It's BS. Because when you invest in a child, you actually invest in your future, in your future, in your future, because they are our leaders of tomorrow. So I knew at that moment we had to pack a case, a brand new pair of pajamas, toiletry items, a book, a stuffy, a blankie, and then we gave them out. I didn't think much more about it until one day I was called by DC Child and Family Services and they asked me to come and talk. I said, I'm a banker. What do you want me to talk about? I can tell you about the interest rates going on right now. It's pretty bad back then too. And so I said, okay. And I went and told my story. And it just so happens that Barbara Harrison from NBC was sitting in the audience and she videotaped me. And the next thing you know, I was on the NBC News. I was in People Magazine. I was CNN. And then I was sitting on Ellen's couch. And I remember she asked me, what did I want? And I said, I just want children in foster care to be recognized. And so we ended up taking this idea and turning it into an international nonprofit. We have delivered over 200,000 cases. We have delivered them to all 50 states, DC and Puerto Rico. And I know I don't have to remind you smart people in this room, Puerto Rico belongs to us. Yes, it is surrounded by water, but so is Hawaii. See, the fact is, Communities were built for one reason, and it was not for us to live in our big houses. Communities were built for us to take care of each other, to take care of each other. If you need a piece of bread and I have it, I should share it with you. Our job on this earth is to serve. And if we're not serving our children, then who are we serving? You know, I actually left my plush executive job, and I'm now a public speaker who goes all over the country to educate people about children in foster care, to make sure that you understand that these children are not foster children. These are children who are in foster care. The fact is that each and every one of you have an opportunity today, and that is to change the future of one of these children. By you packing these bags will make a bigger difference than you can imagine. See, I've been lucky enough to meet children all over the country and now all over the world that we're in the UK. And the kids ask me the same thing over and over. Mr. Rob, why? I say, why what? Why would somebody give me all of this stuff? And they just, it's new. And I look at them and I remind them, as I remind each one of you, you do not have to know someone to love someone. You do not. And normally this is when I finish my talk, I tell you how you all can write a check out to our organization. But in 2019, I made the promise that I would never leave a stage without telling you one more quick story. See, the fact is that I was actually lucky enough to have Derek Jeter, the baseball player, when a great name drop, publish my memoir, Simon and Schuster, and it's being made into a movie. And as we were on a book tour in 2019, I came back from LA and I was in Montgomery County, Maryland. And my assistant called me and said they needed me to go speak at a high school the next day. And I said, I'm exhausted. I've been on a 6-month book tour. I really just want to be home in my bed. I don't want to get up in the morning. And she said, you promised me that you would never say no to a school. She's smart too, by the way. She's been with me 12 years. I said, okay. And the next day I went to a high school. I told my story just like I shared with all of you. And I watched as all the kids left the auditorium. One young boy was still standing there. And he walked up to me and he said, Mr. Scheer, will you please sign my book? I said, of course. What is your name? He said, Alex. I said, Alex, tell me something about yourself. And he says, I have nothing to tell. I said, Alex, we all have a story. He said, no, Mr. Scheer, my story is like yours. I've been in foster care most of my life. I've been in 11 homes. I'm 18 years old. I'm a senior in high school, and I'm getting ready to age out, and I'm going to be homeless just like you. That hit me so hard. I said, Alex, it doesn't have to go that way. He said, no, Mr. Scheer, I've fallen through the cracks of child welfare. I said, Alex, not on my watch. And I handed him my business card and I said, Alex, I have to go give another talk, but I want you to call me. That night I went home and I told Reese and my 4 children about meeting this young boy. And my one son, Mackay, said, Daddy, we should invite him to our house for dinner. I said, what a good idea. He calls the next day, I'll invite him. And sure enough, Alex called me the next day. I said, Alex, my family would love to meet you. I said, what is the phone number to your foster parents? He said, are you talking about the family you wrote about in your book? I said, no, I have a fake family. Of course, it's a family I wrote about in my book, teenagers. And so I called his foster parents and I picked him up on that Saturday and I brought him back home to our home in Maryland. And I watched him as he played in the backyard with my kids. And Reese said, you know what, let's go down to the Rio for dinner. The Rio is a place where there's a bunch of restaurants in Montgomery County. And so we piled the kids up and we went down to the local Mexican place that we eat at least once a week. We sit down and my 10-year-old son, Tristan, looked over at Alex and said, Alex, you know, you can order anything off that menu and my dads don't care. He says, I can order anything. He's like, I'm getting the shrimp fajitas. And he's like, and if I don't eat them all, I don't get in trouble. And my daughter Amaya looked at Alex and said, Alex, haven't you ever been to Guapo's? And Alex says, I don't ever remember someone taking me to a restaurant. At that moment, I saw in my kids' eyes, as a father, what I had been trying to teach them since they were little: empathy. Empathy. See, the fact is empathy is not in our DNA. It is taught. And know how many cases my kids had packed. Hearing that boy say that he had never been to a restaurant affected my children like you would not believe. And literally, we dropped Alex off at his foster parents' house. And my son said, Dad, we have to do something for Alex. I said, I know, I just don't know what to do. And he says, we have to bring him home. I said, what? He said, we have to bring him home. My husband and I were the very first couple in the state of Maryland to ever have a child from foster care come and live with us without a stipend. We petitioned the courts in Baltimore City, and I remember the judge looking at us and saying, "Why would you do this?" I reminded the judge, as I remind each and every one of you, every child deserves a foundation. Every child deserves to have a net. Every child deserves to have someone that is loving them unconditionally. I looked over at Alex and he was crying. He said, "Pops, you changed my life." I said, "No, Alex, you've changed our life. And I have one regret." The judge said, "Mr. Scheer, what is that regret?" I said, "I didn't get to walk him to kindergarten, but now I get to walk with him for the rest of his life." My son just finished his second year of college. He's 22 years old and he's doing amazing. Thank you. Now, since I have a couple of minutes, I just want to let you know how you can get involved besides doing what you're doing now, okay? First of all, we're a 96% volunteer-run charity. Our national headquarters is in Rockville, Maryland. You have volunteer opportunities at any given time to come in and pack cases and help us sort donation items. Number two, any of you that have kids, go clean off those bookshelves, okay? We love books. The fact is there's no such thing as a used book. It's only a book that's been loved, and we love those books. Another thing, each and every one of us do this. For some reason in America, we feel like we have the greed factor. You go to hotels, you take the lotion, you take the shampoo, you take the conditioners, you take the bar soap, you bring them home and you truly act like you're going to really use them. Instead, you stick them in a drawer. We want those, okay? They're perfect sizes. And then the next thing I ask, don't go to the overpriced coffee shop for 1 month and become a bag buster. Literally for $10 a month, by you signing up to be a bag buster, I can literally take this bag out of a child's hand and I can hand them one of them for $10. And most of you spend $10 a day in coffee, okay? So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, look at that. You have time for a couple of questions?
Of course I do have
All right.
time for questions.
Anybody have any questions for Rob?
Oh, come on. I've been all over the, people always have a question. Somebody have a question? Yes, ma'am. Very first Rotary Club that helped me was actually in Gainesville, Virginia. So next question. Yes. So my kids now are 22, 18, 16, 16, and 15. And so we truly have a policy in our house that we never say never. So we never thought that we would have a fifth child. If we did end up adopting another child, it would definitely continue to be an older children. I'm done with diapers.
Me too.
Yeah. Next question.
I think Yasmin knows Derek Jeter too.
Do you?
You guys could.
Okay, yeah, he's a great guy. He's a big supporter of our charity. Big supporter of our charity.
Question for you.
Sure.
Do you do comfort cases full time now?
So no, actually I'm a public speaker. So I spend the majority of my time. Last year I was in 189 hotels, traveling the world, speaking of our charity.
The lotions.
Yeah, I definitely took all the lotions and shampoos, conditioners. I have an agent, so I just filmed a show with Bryce Dallas Howard and Will Smith called Dads. It's a documentary about fathers. I'm producing a new show with Warner Brothers. So I do that full time, but our charity is 96% volunteer ran. So I oversee that, but the majority of my time is in LA or traveling the country. And yes, I am a great dad. My kids come with me quite often on all my trips. So any of you who are thinking I spend that many days in a hotel, how can you be a dad? I'm an amazing dad. Just ask my kids. And I have an amazing husband who's a stay-at-home dad. So that's the best. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah. So we are in the UK. So in 2021, my family, we opened up a center in the United Kingdom where we serve 84,000 children in the UK. This year we will be opening up in Toronto, and next year we'll be in the Dominican Republic. And in the UK, we are 99% volunteer ran. Here we're 96. And by the way, for a nonprofit, that's unusual. That's when people see our 990s, they ask me all the time, how in the world do you do this? And I say, because I run my charity like a business. And if you give me $1, you expect me to invest that dollar wisely. And how do you invest it wisely? And exactly what you're getting ready to do today. Any other questions?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Organizations are out there that allow people, i.e. general public, to work directly
With kids in foster care? Okay, so there's a lot of organizations that allow you to work directly with kids in foster care. And that's the first thing I think we all should realize is change our vocabulary. These are not foster kids. Every time you hear yourself say foster kids, stop yourself and say, these are kids in foster care because they're children. When you say foster kids, immediately you think, what did they do wrong? That's what you think. I mean, seriously, how disturbed are they? What traumas are they dealing with? If we say kids first, all of a sudden our heart gets warmer. But you can join CASA, which is court-appointed special advocates. They are amazing. They are assigned a child from foster care, and they're their support group. You can go visit a group home, and you can, you have to get a little bit of background check done, but you can mentor, go play basketball with them. And by the way, I hate to say this because this is the state I was born in. This is the state that I was raised in. Virginia has the top 5 worst foster care systems in the United States when it comes to our children, and especially when it comes to our aging out children. And even though your governor several years ago signed a bill to pay for tuition for kids in foster care, that didn't happen. Okay.
Oh my God. Oops.
That didn't happen. And let me tell you why. Let me tell you what didn't happen about it. Let me tell you what didn't happen about it is the fact that these children, okay, are offered this particular plan that from your state, just like my state. But the problem is they have to stay in the system. They have to stay in the system to get it. These kids, by the time they're 18 years old, they're so pissed off at us. They don't want to stay in the system. They want to get away. So they lose that. So what we need to do is figure out a program that we can actually get kids to want to get that education, that don't want to run away from this system. And there's ways that we do about that. Don't just pay for tuition, pay for wraparound services. These kids need mental health issues. They have got trauma that they need to deal with. These kids have food insecurities. These kids need to be set up for financial success. If you can pay a stranger every single month a stipend to watch these kids, why can't you take some of that money and put it in an interest-bearing savings account so when they do age out of foster care, they do not become homeless like I did with no money? That is where we fail as a state, and we can do better. We know we can do better here. Any other questions? Yes.
Is that for me?
Yes, Sheila.
Oh, thank you. This has been absolutely mind-boggling, first of all, but absolutely amazing. Have you recircled back to Gainesville? If not, I would like to tie you back to Gainesville and have you do a presentation at our Gainesville club.
Sure, I'll go back. You better.
Oh
believe
my
it.
God. Knowing the Gainesville club the way I do, this would just be absolutely amazing for that club. And then I have other ideas too.
Well,
So
reach out to
I'm
me.
I'm up at the district level for the whole Northern and Eastern Virginia. So I would like to take this a step further with you.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And as I said in the beginning, I love the Rotary. So any
Oh,
other
we love
questions?
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Given that you're kind of fighting the tide against the system, are you seeing any progress in the percentage of children graduating high school, etc.?
What a great question. Am I seeing any progress within our system? Our system has never been better than it is today, and it's the worst. It's the worst. I mean, when you have to realize the fact that you hear quotes of 700 children entering the system every day, that quote is not true. We are now averaging 1,100 children a day. The fact is that we are now having what we call the boomerang kids. These are kids that the state is so invested in reuniting with their family. They send them back to their family before they should, and they're coming back into the system. It's a back and forth situation. Right now, as we sit here today, we have 120,000 children in the United States whose parents' rights have been terminated, and they're waiting to be adopted. The average age is 7. So, for comfort cases, for me, it was picking that low-hanging fruit, starting these kids off with some dignity and hope. And I know that if you pick the low-hanging fruit, your tree actually grows taller. So what I'm hoping is that we continue to keep plucking that off. We started a program here within Comfort Cases probably about 6 or 7 years ago, where we actually give scholarships out now to kids who are aging out of the system to try to incentivize them to do some type of higher education. And then what my team does is once a month, we send them a hope box, a box full of different things, a letter, and then we assign them a mentor to reach out to them every single month. Understand that the reason our college kids are so low in numbers is because we think about things like, oh, we pay your tuition, but what are they doing about eating? What are they doing about when the college campus closes? Where do they go? They end up in the shelter life. And once you end up in the shelter life, it is very hard to escape. I can tell you that right now. So no, I don't see change. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Do you work with other charities?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Of course I work with other charities. It's so funny because when I got into the nonprofit world, I'm a .com guy, so I'm a taker. Okay. So when I became a .org person who is a giver, I was shocked at the number of charities that do not work together. I truly do know that as a businessman, there is enough money to go around. So I do. I actually have the #1 podcast called Fostering Change in the adoption and foster care arena, where I actually bring on other nonprofits and highlight them every Tuesday, because I do believe that our job is to lift each other up. So we work throughout the country with other nonprofits. Any other questions? Yes.
It seems like the huge problem you touched on is graduating out of the foster care system. What has been done to give them any sort of a lifeline?
Well, let me tell you something. First of all, the big problem is that we all ride in on that white horse thinking that we're saving these children, okay? Foster care is not the answer. Understanding that 64% of kids who enter foster care enter under one word, and that the word is called neglect. Neglect is no more than poverty, okay? It's poverty. What we need to do is go back to what communities were built for. Go back to our church base. I don't care what anyone says. I'm not trying to throw my religion down your throat, but the fact is that churches owe us an obligation, and that is to step up and support our kids, support our families. We need to go into the family, stabilize them before the child even comes into the system. Because once the child goes into the system, that's where we failed. But then what happens is we wait till they're 16 or 17 to start talking to them about what's going to go on in their future. By the way, by that time, they've been 5-6 houses. They've been all over the place. They're so ticked off at us. They don't think we care about them. You've got to start the moment they walk in. First thing you start with is therapy, okay? With therapy. Number 2, you have to build trust, security, and know that you're investing in their future. So by the time they're 18, they are willing to do what we need them to do, which is to stay in the system so their college education can be paid for. That's where we make the mistake, because by the time we start tapping them, they're angry. Yes, ma'am.
Last question. We're keeping you after your time.
No, that's fine.
It's on, it's hard to find, I think.
Oh my gosh. As we sit here today, you have, yep. Yeah, well, as you sit here today, you actually have kids here in the state of Virginia, the state of Maryland, the District of Columbia, and any other state that I can name, that children are actually sleeping in offices. We just sent 30 towels to Montgomery, Alabama, because I was there giving a talk and met 3 girls who had been sleeping at the child welfare office, and they had been sharing a towel, because they can't find enough beds. See, the fact is that we all come in here and we vote on different things, and we voted that, group homes are awful. Group homes should be shut down. But nobody thought about, well, where do we put those kids if we take them from group homes because no one's signing up to be foster parents? And I don't know about any of you, but I actually asked my minister, and I'm a Methodist, when is the last time you've ever heard a social worker call up us and say, hey, I want to come and talk to the congregation to be a foster parent? She says, I've been the pastor here for 10 years, Rob. I've never had someone call. I said, let me tell you the reason why. Is because we live on the side of the tracks that they think we do not care. See, it's a lot easier to go to low housing income places and entice them by that check, that $1,000 a month that they get per child with no questions asked. And by the way, you don't have to spend that money on that kid. They don't ask for any accountability on that. So no, the fact is that we are short true families. I don't need your bed. I need you to be a family. And that is something we need to work on. And not everybody's meant to be a foster parent. Hell, it's hard as hell. I will tell you, I have 5. You know, gosh, it's so rewarding. My son Tristan, and I'll leave it with this. My son Tristan came to me when he was 6 months old. His mother was 14. He came into the system because she took a razor blade and carved her initials of her boyfriend in his chest when he was 3 months old. We were his third home. I'll never forget when they gave that baby in my arms. My son just turned 15. He's getting ready to be a freshman in high school, and he received a full scholarship to play football for St. John's Catholic Prep. Kids are resilient. They are resilient. And if you invest in them, as I said, you actually invest in your future. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rob.
Thank you.